All right, Andrew Easton with the ESUCC, and I'm very grateful to Teresa Britta Olson and to Patrice Feller for joining us to have a chat here about some SEBL resources for educators. You maybe got a chance to watch the What is SEBL video that the three of us put together, so check that out if that's really where you would like to start this conversation. This is going to be a little bit more of a deep dive as we start to get into some of the specifics, and I'm really just going to let Patrice speak to some of those. And so would you kind of maybe walk us through a framework for the resources that we're going to share over?
Sure. First of all, CASEL, or the Collaborative for Academic and Social Emotional Learning, provides us with the idea of 4 different approaches to working with SEL in our schools. The first being that of explicit instruction, just doing what we do every day. We teach academics using explicit instruction. We can teach social emotional behavioral learning with explicit instruction. We tell the kids why it's important to learn the skill we're teaching. We show them how to do it. We do it together. We practice. We monitor the students' progress with that. We help them generalize to different settings, and we reteach it if we need to. So that's explicit instruction. It's what we do every day.
Terrific. We're looking for some resources in support of our thinking with this. I know one of the ones we talked about ahead of time is actually out of North Dakota. So would you maybe set up that resource as I share it on screen?
Sure. North Dakota MTSS has developed this SEL site to help educators identify a couple of things. First of all, they base their work on the CASEL framework that we've already talked about in previous videos. And within this, they provide the SEL competencies by grade level. So if you're working with a kindergarten student, it's going to be much different than if you're working for a junior or a senior in high school. So if you're unfamiliar with how those competencies can be framed at your grade level that you're teaching, you can use this resource. And it also has scales or rubrics that you can use for formative assessment for that work.
Yeah, and here's an example of one of those. So I was on the previous site and just had to click on the scales. And so this is, as you can see here, for K2. Would you like to speak through maybe just what these scales entail?
Well, basically, this is like for the grade band of K through 2. And the rubric, which is 1 through 4, 4 being the best. I can use self-management strategies outside of school setting, etc., all the way down to a rubric of 1. I can use this skill with help.
Mm-hmm. Terrific. And that's great that it breaks it down by, as you've said, but grade level, just to reiterate that, because that's really important, because I do think it looks different, and you'd want to see an evolution of those practices over time. So anything else to kind of comment on this site really before we move on to other resources?
Just it's there if it can help you.
Terrific. And I would also point, for those of you maybe looking for something to, just kind of pick up in a pinch, really. I think sometimes we're like, I would love to have a resource or a template or something to build off of. We've shared, and all of these resources will be housed within this website that you're viewing this on most likely. But here is a folder that has a bunch of just really great resources and for some activities or some instruction kind of in the class. So anyway, those are there. Look for those. Let's move on to number 2.
Yes, CASEL talks about a second approach, and that is basically using effective teacher instructional practices, your instructional model, etc. And I'm going to lean on Teresa to talk to this.
Well, I'm sure you've had exposure to either Marzano or Danielson, or maybe your school district has their own homegrown model, but you have an instructional model for what good teaching looks like. And if you start looking through CASEL's competencies, many of those competencies line up with our instructional models. So it's again, this is not a separate thing. It's not its own thing. It's something that we're doing together. So when you look at that instructional model, think about what best practices are actually SEBL practices.
Terrific. And so then maybe we could talk to number 3, the integrating social emotional learning in academic curriculars.
Sure. I think if you use the approach of integrating your social emotional learning instruction in any academic curricular area that you are in charge of, you'll get a bigger bang for your buck. It helps the students generalize the skills that you've taught, etc. And there are some nice tools for that.
Right, because we don't want to make this just the thing that you do in English, right? It is the way you approach your work and interactions with others, etc. So this resource that we're going to share over, this CCC Framework, can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. This is the College and Career Competency Framework. And this uses, of course, it leans on some of the CASEL elements, but it looks at it a little bit differently. And it really speaks first and foremost, because it was created first and foremost for the secondary level students and teachers. So Andrew, if you'll click on that circle down in the bottom right-hand corner. There you go. This wheel shows a different version of the CASEL framework, but you'll see embedded in this are many different skills or competencies, such as self-efficacy or conflict management, problem solving, etc. And the fun way to use this is by clicking on one of those topics that you're interested in teaching in your classroom, because when you click on the topic, it gives you a whole list of resources, including a Padlet that has lesson ideas, etc. All the way to video, so that you can understand that yourself before you start to teach it. Another helpful thing about this website is that they offer in the resources, in the assessments, they offer student self-assessments, so that you can provide a self-assessment to your class to see what skills the different kids may need to work on.
Wow, I was mesmerized by that graphic and all the resources that came up with those different topics. This is just terrific and so comprehensive. So thanks for bringing this up. I'm really excited to be able to share this. So so that's number 3. Do you have anything to kind of say to round that one out before we move on to our 4th and final of these?
Just remembering to integrate with whatever you do, whether you're in the shop, whether you're in English class, you're in math class, etc. You can do it there.
Terrific. And so then our 4th one is the use of organizational culture and climate strategies. Yeah.
Yes, and this approach CASEL talks about, you can either think of it as school-wide or just classroom-wide. If you develop that culture and climate of a community, you're going to be in a position where you have an environment that kids can learn to thrive, and they can feel free to learn the skills that you're trying to teach them.
Terrific. Teresa, any kind of final comments having gone through all this?
No, all I can think of, and after what Patrice just said, was about being a warm demander. Zaretta Hammond, from the author of Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, which is closely related to SEBL work, talks about being a warm demander, that we provide this sense of community and safety in our classrooms so that we can demand high expectations of our kids so they can meet those high academic standards with support. And so I think that's a great way to kind of leave off with SEBL, is that we want to be that warm demander for our kids.
Love that. Love all the information we got a chance to go through today. Thank you for educating all of us on this very important topic and giving us some amazing resources to look to integrate that into the work that we're doing in a remote setting, or really at any and all times. And so thank you both.
Thank you.